The night I found out about the betrayal, my world shattered. It wasn't the kind of slow, creeping realization that haunts you over time. No, this was a thunderclap, a punch to the gut, leaving me gasping for air and clutching at a reality I thought I knew. My wife, Lisa, and my best friend, Marcus, the man I trusted more than anyone, had crossed lines that should never have been crossed. It started with a text I wasn't supposed to see. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand while she was in the shower. A quick glance, born from years of trusting habits, revealed a name I didn't expect. Marcus. The message was a short, flirty line, the kind that makes your skin crawl when it's not meant for you. It took everything in me not to storm into the bathroom and demand answers right then. Instead, I slipped the phone back and played dumb. For the next week, I pieced the puzzle together. A pattern of late-night girls' nights, unexplained absences, and lingering stares between Marcus and Lisa I hadn't wanted to notice before. When I confronted her, Lisa didn't deny it. She didn't even apologize. Her words hit me harder than the betrayal itself. "You weren't paying attention to me, Matt. Marcus did. He saw me." Her smug justification burned. I didn't hit the roof. I didn't throw her out. Instead, I clenched my fists, swallowed the rage, and decided I'd handle this my way. Marcus wasn't just a friend. He was practically family. His daughter, Emily, had even spent summers at my house growing up. The thought of her, young, beautiful, and blissfully unaware of her father's betrayal, planted a seed of revenge in my mind. A dark, twisted idea began to take root. Marcus had taken what was mine. I'd return the favor. Revenge isn't just about getting even. It's about sending a message, one that cuts deep, leaves scars, and ensures the guilty never forget. Marcus thought he could waltz into my life, steal my wife, and walk away unscathed. He underestimated me. He always had. The first step was reaching out to Emily. She was 22 now, newly graduated from college, and working as an intern at a marketing firm downtown. A quick scan of her social media told me all I needed to know. She was still close to her father but lived on her own in a modest apartment. A photo she posted last week showed her celebrating her promotion. That was my opening. I sent her a casual text. "Emily, it's Matt. Long time. No see. I saw your post. Congratulations on the promotion. Let me take you out to celebrate. My treat." Her response came within minutes. "Wow, Matt. I'd love that. When and where?" The ease of her reply didn't surprise me. I'd always been the cool uncle figure in her life, the one who taught her to fish, helped her with school projects, and gave her life advice when Marcus was too busy chasing his own ambitions. She trusted me, and that trust was the knife I'd twist. We met at a trendy rooftop bar the following night. Emily showed up glowing, her youthful energy lighting up the room. She hugged me tightly, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath my calm demeanor. As we sipped cocktails and talked, I leaned into the charm Marcus had always envied. I complimented her achievements, made her laugh, and listened intently to her stories. She was young, naive, and eager for approval. Everything I needed her to be. "Emily," I said, leaning forward as the night deepened, "you've grown into such an incredible woman. I can't tell you how proud I am." Her cheeks flushed, and she smiled shyly. "Thanks, Matt. That means a lot coming from you." Good. I was planting the seeds. The game was on. By the end of the evening, Emily was hooked. It wasn't just the cocktails or the compliments. It was the attention. Marcus had never been good at giving people what they needed emotionally. He was all about himself, his ego, his career. Emily had probably spent years vying for his acknowledgement, only to be met with indifference. I was giving her what he never had, genuine interest, or at least what felt genuine. As we walked out of the bar, I suggested another get-together. "Emily, I've got a couple of tickets to that art exhibit downtown. I know you love that kind of thing. Want to join me next Saturday?" Her face lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "Are you kidding? I've been dying to see that exhibit. I'd love to." The bait was taken. The following week, I poured every ounce of effort into the second meeting. I dressed sharply, choosing a cologne I knew had a subtle, magnetic pull. I researched the exhibit beforehand, so I'd know exactly which pieces to point out to impress her. Everything was calculated. At the gallery, we strolled through halls adorned with abstract masterpieces and vibrant sculptures. I watched her eyes widen with fascination, listened to her passionate interpretations of the art, and played the attentive admirer. Her laughter was unguarded, her smiles free of hesitation. She was comfortable with me, too comfortable. As the evening wound down, I suggested dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant nearby. Over candlelight and wine, I turned the charm up another notch. I leaned in when she spoke, hung on her every word, and occasionally touched her hand lightly for emphasis. I could see her falling, slowly but surely. When the check came, I paid without hesitation. "You're worth it," I said, my voice low and sincere. The look she gave me in response was everything I needed: gratitude, admiration, and something else. Something more. Walking her to her car, I hesitated before saying goodnight. "Emily, tonight was perfect. I can't remember the last time I had such a great time." She smiled, her cheeks pink. "Me too, Matt. I really needed this." Before she could step into her car, I leaned in and kissed her cheek, just enough to blur the lines of uncle and family friend. She didn't pull away. In fact, she lingered, her eyes searching mine as if hoping for more. Not yet, I thought. The game had just begun. The next few weeks passed in a blur of careful planning and strategic moves. Emily and I met often, sometimes for coffee, other times for dinner. Each meeting was another thread in the web I was weaving, another step closer to my ultimate goal. She began to open up more, sharing stories about her life, her dreams, and crucially, her frustrations with her father. "Sometimes I think he only sees me as an extension of himself," she said one evening over dinner. "Like, if I'm not perfect or achieving enough, I'm not good enough for him." I nodded, pretending to empathize. "That sounds exhausting. You deserve someone who sees you for who you are, not who they expect you to be." Her smile in response told me I'd hit the right chord. The resentment she harbored toward Marcus was a crack in her armor, one I intended to exploit fully. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Marcus and Lisa. They were growing bolder, their affair no longer a secret they tried hard to hide. I saw them at a restaurant one evening, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. It fueled my resolve. They were happy, while I was supposed to just move on. Not a chance. One night, Emily and I met at a quiet jazz lounge. The dim lighting, soft music, and intimate atmosphere were perfect for the next phase of my plan. She looked stunning in a simple black dress, her hair cascading over her shoulders. As she slid into the booth opposite me, I couldn't help but notice the glances she drew from other patrons. She was young, radiant, and completely unaware of the storm she was stepping into. Over drinks, I decided to steer the conversation into deeper, more vulnerable territory. "Emily," I said, my tone soft and sincere, "can I tell you something?" She looked up from her martini, curiosity in her eyes. "Of course. I've been going through a lot lately. The betrayal of someone I thought I could trust. It's been hard to deal with." Her expression shifted to concern. "Matt, I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Because I didn't want to burden you. But spending time with you, it's been the only thing keeping me sane." Her eyes softened, and she reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "You're not a burden. I'm glad I can be here for you." It was exactly the opening I needed. I let the silence stretch, holding her gaze, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Then, with deliberate slowness, I brought her hand to my lips and kissed it. Her breath hitched, and I saw the flicker of something I'd been waiting for: desire. This was no longer just a game of revenge. It was a storm, building momentum, ready to consume everything in its path. The kiss on her hand lingered in the air between us like an unspoken promise. Emily didn't pull back. Instead, she let her fingers rest in mine, her cheeks flushing a deeper shade of pink under the dim glow of the jazz lounge. I didn't rush her, didn't push. This wasn't about forcing the moment. It was about letting her take the steps willingly. "Matt," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the smooth saxophone playing in the background, "I don't know what I'd do without you lately. You've been such a steady presence in my life." Her words were heartfelt, genuine. I nodded, letting the gravity of her confession hang for a moment before replying. And you've reminded me what it feels like to have someone truly care. It's been a long time since I felt that. Her eyes searched mine, the hesitation evident. This was it, the precipice. I could see the war in her mind, the conflict of loyalty versus the pull of something deeper, something forbidden. Emily, I said, leaning in closer, our faces now just inches apart. There's something I need to say. She swallowed, her lips parting slightly. What is it? I didn't expect this, I admitted, my voice dropping into a husky whisper. I didn't expect to feel this way about you, but I can't ignore it anymore. Her breath caught, and for a moment, she looked like she might retreat. But instead, she whispered, I feel it too. Before she could second-guess herself, I closed the distance. Our lips met, tentative at first, then with growing intensity. Her hand slid up to my shoulder, and I pulled her closer, the world around us fading into nothing. This wasn't just a kiss. It was the culmination of weeks of carefully laid groundwork, the first step into dangerous territory. When we finally pulled apart, her eyes were wide, her lips slightly swollen. Matt, she breathed, this feels so, right? I finished for her, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Because it is. She didn't protest. Instead, she smiled, shy and uncertain but not pulling away. That was all the confirmation I needed. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of soft touches and lingering glances. When I walked her to her car, I kissed her again, deeper this time, leaving no doubt about where this was headed. She clung to me like I was her lifeline, her anchor in a storm she didn't know I'd created. As she drove away, I stood in the parking lot, watching her taillights disappear into the night. My chest tightened, not with guilt, but with satisfaction. Marcus had no idea what was coming. I wasn't just going to hurt him, I was going to destroy him. The next morning, I woke up feeling sharper, more focused. The pieces were falling into place, and Emily was the centerpiece of it all. Marcus had always been smug, always acted like the world owed him. The thought of him finding out about Emily and me wasn't just satisfying, it was exhilarating. Emily texted me early, her message filled with nervous excitement. Last night was amazing. I don't know what this is, but I want to see you again. Soon. I stared at the screen for a moment before replying, careful to balance interest and control. I feel the same. How about dinner at my place? I'll cook for you. Her reply was almost instant. Yes. When? Tomorrow night, I typed. Just us. Her agreement came with a string of heart emojis, a far cry from the girl who'd hesitated weeks ago. She was all in now, and it wouldn't take long for Marcus's world to crumble. That evening, I decided to set the stage for what was coming. It was time to bait Marcus. I hadn't seen him since the confrontation with Lisa, but I knew his routine like the back of my hand. He had a weekly poker night at the sports bar near his office, a place where egos and whiskey mixed like gasoline and fire. I walked in, scanning the room until I spotted him at his usual table, a cigar between his fingers, laughing with the guys. My presence caught his attention quickly. His laughter faded, replaced by a smug smirk. He probably thought I'd come to confront him again, to make a scene. He had no idea. Matt, he said, leaning back in his chair as I approached, didn't expect to see you here. You finally ready to let bygones be bygones? I smiled coldly. Something like that. Just wanted to let you know I'm doing fine. In fact, better than fine. His smirk deepened. Good for you. Moving on's the right call. Oh, I'm not moving on, I said. My tone is casual as if we were talking about the weather. I'm just redirecting my energy. You'd be surprised what, or who, can bring life back into focus. For a split second, confusion flickered in his eyes. He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned and walked away, leaving him with nothing but questions and a vague sense of unease. Let him stew. The real bomb would drop soon enough. The following night, Emily arrived at my place, radiant and eager. I'd gone all out, candles, soft music, a dinner menu that screamed effort. I wasn't just wooing her. I was making sure she fell hard. The deeper she got, the more devastating it would be for Marcus. Over dinner, She talked about her life, her hopes, and the weight of living in her father's shadow. Every word she spoke was another nail in his coffin, another reminder of how easy it was to dismantle his world. When dessert was over, she stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the city lights. I joined her, standing close enough that our shoulders brushed. "Matt," she said quietly, turning to face me, "this feels dangerous, but I can't stop myself." I cupped her face, my thumb brushing her cheek. "Some risks are worth taking, Emily. This is one of them." Her lips parted as if to say something, but I silenced her with a kiss. This time, there was no hesitation, no doubt. She was mine now, and there was no turning back. As she lay asleep in my bed later that night, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. The plan was working, but there was more to do. Marcus needed to feel the full weight of what he'd done, and Emily was the key. This was just the beginning. The next morning, as Emily slept soundly in my bed, her auburn hair spread across the pillow, I stood by the window and dialed Marcus. The phone rang twice before he answered, his voice groggy and irritated. "What do you want, Matt?" he snapped. I forced a polite tone. "Marcus, I thought we should clear the air. I've been thinking about our friendship and how much history we share. Maybe I overreacted before." There was silence on his end, followed by a cautious response. "Is that right?" "Yes," I continued, keeping my voice calm. "I realized it's not worth holding grudges. Life's too short. Maybe we could grab a drink soon. Catch up like old times?" He sounded skeptical but intrigued. "You serious? Or is this some kind of game?" "I'm serious," I lied smoothly. "What do you say?" After a pause, he agreed. "Fine. Tomorrow night, same bar." "Perfect. See you then," I replied before hanging up. I smirked, knowing the seeds of doubt I'd planted earlier were beginning to sprout. Tomorrow, I'd fan those flames, making sure Marcus sensed that something was off, even if he couldn't figure out what. When Emily woke up, she stretched and smiled at me, completely unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. I brought her coffee and breakfast, further solidifying the connection between us. She was falling faster than I expected. As she left my apartment that morning, she kissed me softly. "I can't wait to see you again, Matt. You make me feel different, special." I watched her walk away, my chest tightening with satisfaction. Marcus had no idea what was unfolding right under his nose. When the time came to meet Marcus, I arrived at the bar early, settling into a booth near the back. The low hum of sports commentary and the clink of glasses created a buzz that matched my rising adrenaline. When he walked in, I waved him over, a casual grin on my face. He slid into the booth across from me, narrowing his eyes. "All right, Matt, what's this really about?" I shrugged, feigning innocence. "Just two friends reconnecting. Can't a guy want that?" He grunted, clearly not convinced. "So, what have you been up to?" "Just living my life," I said, leaning back and sipping my drink. "You know, meeting new people, enjoying myself." His eyes narrowed further. "New people, huh? Anyone I know?" I held his gaze, letting the pause linger just long enough to make him uncomfortable. Then I smiled. "Maybe." His jaw tightened, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. The unease was growing, and I was enjoying every second of it. As the night went on, I dropped subtle hints, carefully chosen words that painted a vague picture of my newfound happiness. He pressed for details, but I never gave him enough to confirm anything. By the time we parted ways, his frustration was palpable. Walking out of the bar, I felt the adrenaline coursing through me. The game was shifting, the stakes climbing higher. Marcus would soon realize the depth of my revenge, and Emily would be the weapon that delivered the blow. The days that followed were a masterclass in subtle destruction. Marcus's unease was growing, and I made sure to feed it at every opportunity. Meanwhile, Emily became more enmeshed in my life. She texted me constantly, her messages filled with excitement and longing. I responded just enough to keep her hooked, careful not to appear too eager. One evening, she invited me to dinner at her apartment. It was a small, cozy space, decorated with the kind of youthful charm that made her feel even more naive and vulnerable. She'd cooked pasta, her cheeks flushed with pride as she set the table. This is the first real meal I've made for anyone, she admitted, her voice tinged with nervousness. It's perfect, I said, holding her gaze. You're perfect. Her blush deepened, and she reached for my hand. I don't know how you do it, Matt. You make me feel so alive. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. She thought this was love. She had no idea she was a pawn in a much larger game. As the evening progressed, we ended up on her couch, her head resting on my shoulder as we talked about everything and nothing. When she fell asleep in my arms, I stared at the ceiling, the weight of what I was doing pressing down on me. But the thought of Marcus, smug, arrogant Marcus, made it all worthwhile. The next morning, I left her apartment early, citing a work meeting. She kissed me goodbye, her trust in me as solid as ever. Driving away, I thought about how easily she'd fallen for the facade I'd created. It wasn't guilt I felt, it was power. That evening, I decided to escalate things further. I knew Marcus was at the bar for his weekly poker game. I called Emily, my voice warm and inviting. Hey, how about a late dinner? My treat. Tonight? She asked, surprised but eager. I'd love that. I suggested a restaurant downtown, one I knew was popular with Marcus and his crowd. When we arrived, I chose a table in the corner but with a clear line of sight to where Marcus usually sat. As we ate, I leaned in close, my hand occasionally brushing hers. Emily giggled, her eyes sparkling. I noticed Marcus the moment he walked in. He froze when he saw us, his face a mask of confusion and anger. He didn't approach, but I could feel his eyes on us the entire time. Emily, oblivious to his presence, laughed and shared stories about her work, completely unaware of the chaos she was about to unleash in her father's world. As we left the restaurant, I made sure to kiss her just outside the door, where Marcus could see us. It wasn't a long kiss, but it was enough. A deliberate act designed to plant the seeds of suspicion firmly in his mind. When I glanced back, Marcus was staring, his expression a mixture of rage and disbelief. I smiled to myself, knowing the cracks in his world were beginning to widen. The night after the restaurant encounter, I got a call from Marcus. His number flashed on my screen, and I smirked, knowing he couldn't resist any longer. I let it ring a few times before answering, keeping my voice casual. Marcus, I said, what's up? What's up? He barked, his tone barely containing his anger. I think you know damn well what's up. I saw you last night, Matt. I feigned confusion. Last night? Oh, you mean at the restaurant? What about it? You were with my daughter, he snapped. What the hell are you playing at? Playing? I repeated, letting my tone harden slightly. There's nothing to play at, Marcus. Emily is an adult. We had dinner. Nothing more. Don't give me that crap, he roared. You're out of line, Matt. Whatever this is, it ends now. His fury was satisfying, but I kept my composure. I think you're overreacting, Marcus. Maybe if you'd been paying attention to her, she wouldn't have needed someone like me to step in. There was a moment of stunned silence before he hissed, You're sick. She's my daughter, Matt. And Lisa is my wife. I shot back, my voice cold and sharp. Funny how betrayal cuts both ways, doesn't it? He stammered, caught off guard. This isn't about Lisa. Oh, but it is, Marcus, I said, letting the venom seep into my tone. You crossed a line, and now you get to see what it feels like when someone takes what's yours. Before he could respond, I hung up. My heart was pounding, adrenaline surging through me. The confrontation had been inevitable, and now that it was done, the real fallout could begin. The next day, Emily texted me, asking if something was wrong. Dad's acting weird, she wrote. He keeps asking me about us. Did you say something? I crafted my reply carefully. He probably just saw us at the restaurant and got protective. Don't worry about it. Her response was immediate. I told him you're the best thing that's happened to me in ages. He'll come around. I stared at her message, the naivety in her words almost laughable. She believed this was real, that what we had was something her father would have to accept. Little did she know, she was just a pawn in a game far bigger than she could comprehend. That evening, Marcus showed up at my doorstep. His knock was loud, almost violent. When I opened the door, he stormed inside, his face red with anger. You think this is funny? He growled, jabbing a finger at my chest. Using my daughter to get back at me? I didn't invite you in, Marcus, I said coolly, stepping aside and closing the door. But since you're here, let's talk. He didn't sit down. Instead, he loomed over me, his fists clenched. This ends now, Matt. I'll tell Emily everything if I have to. Go ahead, I said, my voice calm but cutting. Tell her how you betrayed me. Tell her how you ruined a marriage for your own selfish desires. See how that goes over. His face twisted in rage, but there was a flicker of fear in his eyes. He knew he'd lose Emily if she found out the truth about his affair with Lisa. That fear was my leverage, and I wasn't afraid to use it. This isn't over, he snarled, turning to leave. No, it's not, I called after him. But you should know, Marcus, you've already lost. As the door slammed shut behind him, I smiled to myself. The game was reaching its climax, and Marcus was unraveling. The pieces were falling into place, and soon, his entire world would come crashing down. The days following Marcus's outburst were deliciously chaotic. He was unraveling, just as I'd planned. I kept my distance from him, letting the tension simmer and boil. Meanwhile, Emily and I grew closer. She texted constantly, asking to meet again, sending photos of herself with captions like, "Can't wait to see you." Her naivety was almost endearing. She had no idea she was a pawn in my carefully orchestrated revenge. One evening, while we were having dinner at her apartment, she brought up Marcus again. "Dad's been so weird lately," she said, swirling her wine. "He keeps dropping these vague comments about you, like I should be careful or something. It's like he's jealous." I smiled, leaning back in my chair. Jealousy does strange things to people, Emily. Sometimes it makes them see problems where there aren't any. She sighed. "It's just frustrating. I told him how happy you make me, but he's acting like I'm making a mistake. That's because he doesn't know how to be happy for anyone but himself," I said, my tone sharper than intended. Emily frowned, her eyes narrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" I hesitated for a moment, debating whether to take the plunge. But then I decided it was time to light the fuse. "There are things about your dad you don't know, Emily. Things I don't think he wants you to know." Her curiosity was piqued. "Like what?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "I shouldn't be the one to tell you, but let's just say he's not the man you think he is." Her face darkened, confusion and worry mingling in her expression. "Matt, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "I promise, I'll tell you everything," I said, my voice softening. "But not tonight. Tonight is about us." She hesitated but nodded, letting it go for now. I knew the seed was planted, and it was only a matter of time before she started questioning everything she thought she knew about her father. Later that night, after Emily had fallen asleep, I checked my phone. There were 3 missed calls from Marcus and a text message that read, "You're crossing the line, Matt. Stop this, or you'll regret it." I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. Marcus was on the verge of losing control, and that's exactly where I wanted him. He didn't scare me. He'd already played his hand, and now it was my turn. The next morning, I called Emily and asked her to meet me for coffee. When she arrived, she looked concerned. "Matt, is everything okay? You sounded serious." I nodded, gesturing for her to sit. "Emily, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Do you trust your dad?" She blinked, startled by the question. "Of course I do. Why wouldn't I?" I leaned forward, my tone grave. "Because he hasn't been honest with you. I didn't want to tell you this, but you deserve to know the truth." Her expression shifted, worry creeping into her features. "What truth?" I took a deep breath, as if what I was about to say pained me. "Your dad, he had an affair. With someone close to me. Someone I loved." Her eyes widened, shock and disbelief flashing across her face. "No, that can't be true." "I wish it wasn't," I said, my voice heavy with faux regret. "But it is. That's why he's been acting so strange lately. He knows I know, and he's afraid of how you'll react when you find out." Emily stared at me, her hands trembling. "Why would he do that? Who was it?" I hesitated, then said softly, "My wife." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. I don't believe this, she whispered. I can't believe this. I'm so sorry, I said, reaching for her hand. I didn't want you to find out like this, but you deserve to know the kind of man he really is. She pulled her hand away, standing abruptly. I need to talk to him, she said, her voice shaking. I need to hear it from him. I watched her leave, a mix of satisfaction and anticipation churning in my chest. The truth, or at least my version of it, was out now. Marcus's world was about to collapse, and I couldn't wait to see it happen. That evening, I waited with bated breath, knowing Emily would confront Marcus. The storm I'd carefully crafted was about to explode, and there was no turning back. Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Emily. Her message read, "You were right." He admitted it. I can't believe him. I smirked, the satisfaction coursing through me. I knew Marcus would confess under pressure. His guilt was his weakness, and Emily's tears would have shattered any defenses he tried to put up. He wouldn't have the spine to deny it, not when faced with his daughter's heartbreak. I texted back carefully. I'm so sorry, Emily. I know how hard this must be for you. If you need to talk, I'm here. Her reply came moments later. Can I come over? I don't want to be alone right now. Perfect. When Emily arrived, her face was streaked with tears, her expression a mixture of anger and devastation. I welcomed her inside, wrapping her in a comforting embrace. She clung to me, her body trembling as she sobbed into my chest. He admitted it, she said through choked breaths. He didn't even try to deny it. How could he do something so horrible? I stroked her hair, my voice calm and steady. People like him. They think they're untouchable. They think they can do whatever they want without consequences. She pulled back slightly, looking up at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. You must hate him so much. Hate wasn't the word. Contempt, maybe. Loathing. But I didn't say that. Instead, I cupped her face gently. I don't hate him, Emily. I just want him to understand what it feels like to lose everything. Her gaze softened, and she leaned into my touch. He deserves it, she whispered. It was all I needed to hear. The next few days were a whirlwind of chaos for Marcus. Emily refused to speak to him, ignoring his calls and avoiding him entirely. I knew this because she told me. Every text she sent, every word she spoke, was another piece of information I could use to keep driving the wedge deeper between them. Marcus, on the other hand, was spiraling. He called me twice, both times leaving voicemails filled with threats and demands. I didn't respond. Let him stew in his own paranoia. He was already on the edge, and I wanted him to fall. Meanwhile, I kept Emily close, playing the role of her confidant and protector. I listened as she vented about her father, as she poured out her heartbreak and frustration. Each tear she shed, each word of anger, was fuel for my revenge. You're the only person I can trust right now, she told me one night as we sat on my couch. Everyone else just feels tainted. I held her hand, my expression sincere. You can always trust me, Emily. I'll never let you down. She smiled weakly, her trust in me solidifying even further. It was almost too easy. The breaking point came a few days later. Emily called me in the middle of the night, her voice frantic. Dad showed up at my apartment. He's furious, Matt. He's saying crazy things about you, about us. I don't know what to do. I clenched my jaw, forcing calm into my voice. Stay where you are. I'll be there in 10 minutes. When I arrived at her apartment, Marcus was already outside, pacing like a caged animal. The moment he saw me, his face twisted in fury. You, he shouted, storming toward me. You did this. You turned her against me. I stood my ground, my voice cold and steady. You did that all on your own, Marcus. Maybe it's time you faced the consequences of your actions. He lunged at me, but I sidestepped, letting him stumble past. Emily appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of shock and anger. Dad, stop, she yelled. You're only making it worse. Marcus froze, turning to look at her. Emily, don't you see what he's doing? He's manipulating you. He doesn't care about you. He's just using you to hurt me. Her face hardened, and she crossed her arms. You don't get to lecture me about manipulation, Dad. You lied to me my entire life. Don't you dare try to play the victim now. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Emily's rejection was the final blow, the one he couldn't recover from. I watched as he stumbled back, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Without another word, he turned and walked away, his world crumbling around him. Emily turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for being here," she said softly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I pulled her into an embrace, my expression unreadable. Marcus was broken, and Emily was mine now. The game was over. Or was it? The next morning, I sat in my apartment sipping coffee, replaying the events from the night before. Marcus's desperate attempts to salvage his relationship with Emily had been as pitiful as I'd hoped. He was a broken man, flailing in the wreckage of his life, and I had made sure every piece of it had shattered in just the right way. Emily texted me shortly after sunrise. "Thank you for last night. I couldn't have gotten through it without you." I replied simply, "Always here for you." She was tethered to me now, emotionally and otherwise. Marcus's worst fears weren't just paranoia. They were his reality. His daughter no longer trusted him, and his pride was in tatters. I had dismantled him brick by brick. Later that day, Emily invited me over. Her apartment was in chaos, boxes stacked everywhere. "I'm moving," she announced when I walked in. "Moving?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "Why?" "I can't stay here," she said, her voice resolute. "Dad knows where I live, and I don't feel safe. He's been blowing up my phone all morning." She showed me the screen, littered with missed calls and frantic messages. Most were some variation of "Call me, Emily," or "We need to talk." One, however, stood out. "If you keep seeing him, you'll regret it." I clenched my jaw, the message filling me with a dark satisfaction. "You don't have to deal with this alone, Emily. Let me help." Her shoulders sagged, the weight of her father's betrayal visibly taking its toll. "I don't even know where to start." "I'll take care of it," I said firmly. "We'll find you a new place, somewhere he can't bother you." She looked at me with wide, grateful eyes. "You'd do that for me?" "Of course," I said, my voice soft but unwavering. "I'll always protect you, Emily." The next few days were a whirlwind of apartment hunting and moving logistics. Emily leaned on me for everything, trusting me implicitly. I found her a beautiful one-bedroom in a secure building, paid the deposit, and even helped her pack and move. As we set up her new place, she paused and looked at me, her expression serious. "Matt, I don't know how to thank you. You've done so much for me." "You don't need to thank me," I said, brushing a stray hair from her face. "I just want you to be happy." Her eyes filled with tears, and she threw her arms around me. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I held her tightly, the satisfaction of her words washing over me. She was mine now, fully and completely. Marcus's influence was gone, replaced by my presence in her life. Meanwhile, Marcus was unraveling further. Emily's refusal to speak with him, coupled with her sudden move, sent him into a spiral. He left me several voicemails, each more desperate and angry than the last. One, in particular, stood out. "You think you've won, Matt? You think you've destroyed me? This isn't over. I'll make sure you pay for this." I laughed as I listened, the sheer futility of his threats almost comical. Marcus had lost everything. His daughter, his pride, his control, and he knew it. He was grasping at straws, trying to find a way back into Emily's life. But every move he made only pushed her closer to me. A week after Emily moved into her new place, she invited me over for dinner. As we sat on her couch, laughing and sipping wine, she leaned her head on my shoulder. "I feel like I can finally breathe again," she said softly, "like I've left all the chaos behind." I wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. "You deserve peace, Emily, and I'll do everything I can to make sure you have it." She tilted her head up to look at me, her eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper. "I'm so lucky to have you, Matt." "No," I said, my voice low. "I'm the lucky one." She smiled, and in that moment, I knew I had her completely. Marcus had no power left, no cards to play. I had taken everything from him, and Emily was the proof. The game wasn't just over. It was mine. The calm that followed Emily's move was short-lived. Marcus wasn't the type to go quietly, and his next move proved that. One evening, as I left Emily's apartment, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. "Matt," Marcus's voice came through, cold and sharp. "We need to talk?" "Do we?" I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Don't play dumb," he snapped. "Meet me at the bar, tomorrow night. Alone." I hung up without agreeing, but I knew I'd go. Marcus had nothing left to lose, which made him dangerous. It was time to see what he had planned. The bar was nearly empty when I arrived the next night. Marcus sat in a booth at the back, a half-empty glass of whiskey in front of him. His eyes were bloodshot, his face gaunt. He looked like a man on the edge. "You came," he said as I slid into the seat across from him. "What do you want, Marcus?" I asked, leaning back and keeping my voice steady. He glared at me, his jaw tight. "I want my life back." I laughed, shaking my head. "Your life? You threw it away, Marcus. You have no one to blame but yourself." His hand slammed down on the table, making the glasses rattle. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Manipulating my daughter, turning her against me. You're sick." "Am I?" I asked, leaning forward. "Or am I just giving you a taste of your own medicine?" His face twisted with rage. "This isn't over. You don't get to win." "Oh, I already have," I said, my voice calm but cutting. "Emily doesn't trust you. Lisa doesn't want you. You're a broken man, Marcus. You've got nothing." His fist clenched, and for a moment, I thought he might swing at me. But instead, he leaned back, his expression hardening. "You're going to regret this, Matt. You have no idea what I'm capable of." "Neither do you," I replied, standing. "Good luck, Marcus. You're going to need it." As I walked out, I felt the weight of his glare on my back. He wasn't done fighting, but neither was I. The next round was already in motion. 2 days later, Emily called me in tears. "Dad showed up at my work," she said, her voice shaking. "He made a scene, yelling about how I've betrayed him." "What did you do?" I asked, my tone calm but concerned. "I told him to leave. My boss had to call security to get him out." "Matt, I don't know what to do anymore." I clenched my jaw, anger simmering beneath the surface. "He's desperate, Emily. Don't let him manipulate you." "I won't," she said, her voice firm. "I'm done with him." Her words were a victory, but they came with a cost. Marcus was unraveling faster than I'd anticipated, and his desperation was making him reckless. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals lash out. That night, I received a message from an anonymous number. It was a photo of Emily and me at the restaurant, kissing outside the door. The caption read, "You've gone too far. This ends now." I stared at the message, my chest tightening. Marcus was escalating, and he'd found a way to hit back. But I wasn't about to let him win. This was a war, and I was prepared to fight until the bitter end. The next morning, I called Emily, my voice steady despite the storm brewing. "Emily, I need to talk to you about something." "What's wrong?" she asked, concern in her voice. "Your dad's not done yet," I said. "He's trying to stir up trouble, and I need you to trust me." "I do," she said without hesitation. "What's going on?" "Just be careful," I warned. "He's desperate, and he'll do anything to get to you." She promised she'd stay cautious, but I could hear the fear in her voice. Marcus was playing his last card, and I had to make sure it didn't work. The game wasn't over yet, but the stakes were higher than ever. The next few days were a blur of calculated maneuvers. Marcus's threats had become more persistent, but they were hollow bluster. He hadn't figured out my endgame, and his anger made him reckless. Emily, meanwhile, grew increasingly wary of her father. Every interaction pushed her closer to me, solidifying the wedge I'd driven between them. One evening, while Emily and I were cooking dinner at her apartment, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, her expression darkening. "It's him again." I picked up the phone and saw Marcus's name flashing on the screen. "Do you want me to answer it?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "No, let him stew." As the call went to voicemail, she sighed and leaned against the counter. "He doesn't understand, Matt. I'm done. I don't want to deal with him anymore." "You don't have to," I said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. He made his choices. Now he has to live with the consequences. She nodded, her resolve strengthening. You're right. I just hate that it's come to this. I held her gaze, my voice soft but firm. Sometimes people show us who they really are. It's painful, but it's the truth. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she wrapped her arms around me. Thank you for being here. I don't know what I'd do without you. I hugged her tightly, knowing that Marcus's fury would only grow when he realized he'd truly lost her. The next day, Marcus escalated again. Emily called me during her lunch break, her voice shaking with anger. He showed up at my new apartment, Matt. He was banging on the door, yelling about how I've abandoned him. Did you let him in? I asked, already knowing the answer. Of course not, she said. I called security, and they escorted him out. But I'm scared. What if he doesn't stop? I clenched my jaw, the tension in my chest building. He's trying to intimidate you, Emily. Don't let him. If he shows up again, call the police. Do you really think it'll come to that? She asked, her voice small. It might, I said honestly, but I'll be here every step of the way. You're not alone. Her gratitude was evident in her silence, and I knew she was relying on me more than ever. Marcus's desperation was driving him to extremes, but I wasn't about to let him derail my plans. That evening, I decided to confront Marcus directly. I called him, my tone sharp and to the point. We need to talk. Now. He hesitated, then agreed to meet at a nearby park. When I arrived, he was pacing near a bench, his expression wild and unhinged. You've crossed the line, Matt, he said the moment he saw me. This isn't just about me anymore. You're ruining her life. Ruining her life? I repeated, my voice cold. You're the one who lied to her, betrayed her trust. I'm the one picking up the pieces. You don't care about her, he snapped. You're using her to hurt me. I took a step closer, my gaze unwavering. Maybe I was at first. But now? I care about her more than you ever did. You don't deserve to call yourself her father. He lunged at me, but I sidestepped, letting him stumble forward. You're pathetic, Marcus, I said, my voice dripping with disdain. You've lost. Accept it. His chest heaved, his face a mask of fury and defeat. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll find a way to make you pay. I laughed, shaking my head. You've got nothing, Marcus. No leverage, no power. You're done. As I walked away, I could feel his hatred burning into my back. He was a man on the edge, and it was only a matter of time before he snapped completely. When I got home, I found a message from Emily waiting on my phone. Thank you for everything, Matt. I've never felt this safe, this cared for. I'm so lucky to have you. I stared at the message, a dark satisfaction settling over me. Marcus had nothing left. Emily was mine now, and there was no going back. As the days passed, Marcus's desperation morphed into something darker. I could feel it in his silence, the absence of his usual erratic texts and voicemails. He was planning something, and I knew better than to underestimate him. A man with nothing left to lose could be dangerous, but I'd come too far to back down now. Emily, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension, was thriving. Her new apartment, her new life, all of it was flourishing under the guise of safety I provided. She trusted me completely, leaning on me for support while distancing herself further from her father. One evening, as we were watching a movie at her place, there was a knock at the door. Emily froze, her eyes darting to me. It's him, she whispered. I stood, motioning for her to stay seated. I'll handle it. Opening the door, I found Marcus standing there, disheveled and visibly intoxicated. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair a mess. He looked like a man on the verge of collapse. What do you want, Marcus? I asked coldly. I want to talk to my daughter, he slurred, his words thick with alcohol. You've poisoned her against me, Matt. You've taken everything. She doesn't want to see you, I replied, stepping forward to block his view of the living room. Go home, Marcus. You're not welcome here. He shoved me, his strength fueled by anger. You don't get to tell me what to do. She's my daughter. Before I could respond, Emily appeared behind me. Dad, stop, she said, her voice trembling. You need to leave. Marcus's face crumpled as he looked at her. Emily, please. Don't let him do this. I'm your father. You were my father, she said, her voice breaking. But I don't know who you are anymore. Her words hit him like a physical blow. He stumbled back, his eyes wide with disbelief. You don't mean that, he said weakly. I do, she said, tears streaming down her face. You've destroyed everything. Just go. Marcus looked at me, his expression shifting from desperation to hatred. This isn't over, Matt, he spat before turning and walking away. I closed the door, locking it behind him. Emily collapsed onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. I sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. He's gone, I said softly. You're safe. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. I don't think I'll ever forgive him. You don't have to, I said. You deserve better. She nodded, leaning into me for comfort. Marcus was losing more than just his daughter. He was losing any grip on his sanity. The next morning, I woke to a barrage of messages from Marcus. Photos of Emily and me, screenshots of texts he'd somehow gotten his hands on, and a single message. If you think you've won, you're wrong. This isn't over. I stared at the phone, a cold realization settling over me. Marcus wasn't just desperate, he was dangerous, and he was about to make his move. The message from Marcus wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. He was spiraling, and I knew his next move would be reckless and destructive. The photos he sent were meaningless to me, but to Emily, they could shake the fragile foundation of trust I'd built. He was playing his final card, and I had to be ready. That evening, as Emily and I sat together on her couch, my phone buzzed with another message. This time, it was a video. Marcus's voice filled the room as the clip played, his words laced with venom. Emily, this is for you. I want you to know the kind of man Matt really is. The one you think you can trust. The video was a recording of a confrontation we'd had weeks ago, spliced together with photos and messages to make it seem like I'd been manipulating her from the start. It was Marcus's attempt to dismantle everything I'd worked so hard to build. Emily's face paled as she watched, her hands trembling. What is this? She whispered. It's Marcus trying to destroy us, I said firmly. He's desperate, Emily. He'll say and do anything to turn you against me. But this, she trailed off, her voice shaking. Is it true? No, I said, my voice steady. He's twisting things, taking them out of context. You know me, Emily. You know who I am. Her eyes searched mine, uncertainty flickering across her face. I reached for her hands, holding them tightly. Emily, think about everything we've been through, I said. He's trying to manipulate you, just like he's done your whole life. Don't let him win. She hesitated, the weight of doubt pressing down on her. Finally, she nodded, her expression hardening. You're right. He's trying to control me again. I won't let him. Relief washed over me, but I knew this wasn't over. Marcus was pushing harder than ever, and he wasn't going to stop until he felt he'd regained some semblance of control. The next day, I made the first move. I sent Marcus a text, knowing he wouldn't ignore it. Marcus, this ends now. Meet me tonight at the park. Let's settle this once and for all. His reply came within minutes. Fine. You want to end this? I'll be there. That evening, I arrived at the park, the air thick with tension. Marcus was already there, pacing like a predator waiting to strike. When he saw me, he strode forward, his face twisted with rage. This is your last chance, Matt, he growled. Stay away from my daughter. I stood my ground, my voice cold and calm. She's not yours to control anymore, Marcus. She sees you for what you are, a liar and a hypocrite. His fists clenched, and for a moment, I thought he might swing at me. But instead, he laughed bitterly. You think you've won, don't you? I don't think, I said, stepping closer. I know. His laughter stopped, replaced by a glare of pure hatred. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said, turning to leave. But not today. The fallout was swift and brutal. Marcus's escalating behavior had left a trail of destruction, and Emily finally decided to cut ties completely. She filed a restraining order against him, ensuring he couldn't come near her or or her new apartment. The courts took her side, citing his harassment and erratic behavior as evidence of a threat. Emily thanked me over and over, her gratitude boundless. "You've saved me, Matt," she said one night as we sat together. "You've given me a chance to start over." I smiled, pulling her close. "You deserved it, Emily, and I'll always be here for you." Marcus, on the other hand, disappeared from our lives. His threats became empty echoes, his presence a ghost of the chaos he'd once caused. I had dismantled his world piece by piece, and now he was nothing more than a broken man with no power left. As for Emily, she was mine completely. The game was over, and I had one. Have you ever faced betrayal that pushed you to the edge? How would you handle it if someone you trusted crossed the line? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories. Don't forget to like this story, subscribe for more gripping tales of betrayal and revenge, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new upload. Let's keep the conversation going.